Hello, welcome to Frame Live. My name is Robert Timon. I'm the editor-in-chief and founder of Frame. Today's session of Frame Live is all about nature and the home. This session is brought to you as part of Dutch Design Week, which is currently happening in a virtual way, unfortunately. And we are partnering up for this session with IKEA. Why IKEA? Each year, IKEA conducts a research report about life at home. And this year's report captures the extraordinary global shared experiences of the pandemic. From their research, they created the IKEA Virtual Greenhouse. That's a series of masterclasses, live talks, interactive experiences by expert creatives in food, well-being, sustainability, and botany, to help you cultivate a more sustainable and balanced life at home. And as a part of that virtual greenhouse, we are hosting this session today with a great panel that I will now introduce to you. It's consisting of Oliver Heath. He's the founder of Oliver Heath Design. And Oliver is a biophilic design consultant from Brighton, UK. Nina Sickenga, she's the co-founder of MOS, Makers of Sustainable Spaces, located in Amsterdam. And MOS knows everything about greening spaces in and out. And then Antonin Yuji Maeno from Cutwork, one of the founders of Cutwork. And that's an architectural and design firm, I should say, specializing in shared spaces like co-living spaces and co-working spaces. And unfortunately, Kelsea Crawford cannot be with us today because of an emergency. So it's only Antonin, but I can assure you that it's really worthwhile to be with us. Hi guys, you can please unmute.
Hello, everybody.
All good? All good. So, well, we explained in the brief introduction to this session that lots and lots of things have changed this year. The pandemic, of course, doesn't need any further introduction. But furthermore, we were experiencing rapid urbanization. I believe there's now a counter trend coming, but let's suppose that will be happening slowly, and our cities will be full with people, full with cars, full with people commuting to their work, and people experiencing stress because of that. And then there's climate change coming. Some people are denying this, but it's actually real, and we need to be doing something against that. So we have the pandemic, we have people living in urban spaces, feeling stressed, and we have climate change that is coming upon us. We need to change how we live and work, in short. And I think IKEA understood that very well with their virtual greenhouse initiative. And if you look at the home part of what we should be doing, that's what the research of IKEA brought forward, is getting closer to nature. If you're in the audience and you think, yeah, I've got a garden, I've got a balcony with plants on it, I've got some plants in pots inside my home. I'm green. Well, think again. Today we will explore what else you can do and also how you can do that and why you should be doing that to get closer to nature and release the wilderness inside your home. We will be doing so by letting the panelists speak about some images that I asked them to send us. And these images, they will function as the starting point of a little conversation. And let's make a start with showing the first image, which will be answering the question, what are the benefits of living with and close to nature? Oliver, you send us this particular picture. What does it represent to you?
Well, this is actually my home in Brighton, and it embodies many of the sort of biophilic design principles that we hold true in my practice. My practice is slightly unusual in that we are both architectural and interior designers, but also researchers. So we spend a lot of time collating knowledge and research that's been brought together over the last 25 years. And we write a series of sort of white paper reports about the benefits of bringing nature into the built environment. Now, essentially, you mentioned some really important issues, the pandemic, urbanization, and a sort of rising interest in our health and well-being and the stresses that we're experiencing. Now, just to sort of take it back, why is this important and why is it sort of so relevant to all of us, to each of us, not just us as panelists and individuals, but also the wider general public? If you think about it, for 99.5% of human evolution, we've existed in very close connection to healthy forms of nature for our basic human survival. So we've had to develop our instincts in order to recognize landscapes that can support us, that can help us to survive, thrive, and flourish. Now we move on a few 100,000 years, we've got the Industrial Revolution, we've become urbanized, and now we move into the technological evolutionary stage. And we find ourselves living in these dense, noisy, urban, bustling, geometric cities that are relentless, they're always on. And we find ourselves having not evolutionarily changed very much. So we're still, the same. But we have this sort of genetic inheritance that still allows us to recognize spaces that can support human life, the spaces that are flourishing, that are healthy. And that's still important to us today. We are, of course, very adaptable. We can live in these noisy, bustling, smoggy, polluted cities, but it doesn't mean that we're actually living our best possible lives. And that's important, partly for the home, but also in the buildings that are so important in our lives. Buildings such as our workplaces, hospitality, healthcare, educational facilities. So when we recognize that our contact with nature is still important to us, then it starts to shape the way we can think about architecture and our built environment as a whole. Now, there's an interesting idea called the savanna theory that suggests that when we look out over lush, healthy green spaces from a point of safety, or what we call prospect, then it actually has this incredible ability to reduce heart rates and blood pressure levels, to make us feel more calm, more relaxed, and to help us to recuperate from intense physical or mental periods of activity and stress. So what the idea suggests is that when we are presented with these areas of greenery, we can feel better. Now, of course, that's something that we all recognize when we spend time in nature. The difficult thing is how we then translate those ideas of lush, healthy, savanna-like environments, which we have a preference for, into our noisy, bustling, geometric cities. And in a way, that's where biophilic design steps in. So biophilia quite literally means the love of nature. And it's a term that was kind of popularized in the 1980s by Edward O. Wilson. And then Stephen Kellett, who was one of the godfathers of biophilic design, translated that idea that we have an affinity to be in and around nature with a set of what we call design patterns, or biophilic design patterns, which are essentially a series of features that allow us to bring elements of nature into the built environment. And by following those patterns, we can create spaces that have both direct forms of nature, so that's kind of like real sensory forms of nature, be that trees and plants, water and light, or indirect references to nature, which are things like natural colors, materials, textures and patterns, but also to remember that we are, as human beings, part of nature. You know, we're not separate or devoid from it. We're very much part of it and we're reliant on it. So we need to be creating spaces that mimic those spaces that supported us, spaces that are exciting and stimulating and energizing, but also calming, relaxing and restorative. So many of the choices of the materials, the colors, the textures, the patterns, and of course the planting that you see here in my own home are things that pick up on that sort of evolutionary design ethos, elements that will make us feel calm and relaxed, or maybe stimulated, or maybe bring people together. Because there are two approaches to biophilic design. One is a neuroscientific approach that basically suggests that when we spend time in nature, it's good for us. It helps us to be calm, to reduce stress, to recuperate. So it's good for us as individuals. But there's also a socio-psychological approach that suggests that when we bring elements of nature into the built environment, it has the ability to enhance that experience of space and to connect us more deeply, because of that positive experience, with places and spaces, and importantly, people in it. So we're really interested as a design company in how we can use elements of nature and these shared experiences of that nature and bring those into buildings in order to bring people together, to give them sort of shared points of conversation that are quietly distracting, or as we say, have a sort of soft fascination. So things like plants and gentle movement, the flickering flames as we sit around a campfire are all sort of quietly distracting. They're warming, they're nurturing, they bring us together and give us that sort of shared focus. So what was I essentially doing in my home is sort of bringing all these ideas together in order to create essentially a place that brings myself and my family together, but also acts as a calming and restorative space that provides moments of energy and stimulation within them.
Thanks, Oliver. That's very comprehensive. So we need to be closer to nature, if I understand you rightly, to actually simply feel better. And we can do so in a variety of ways, by being close to actual nature, so plants and flowers and trees, by working with natural materials, natural looking shapes, so shapes that bio-mimic nature, and by being closer to people, right?
Yeah, what's biomorphic is the shape. So those are the shapes that we see that remind us of nature, you know, like a sort of, like the shape of a puppy's head is sort of mimicked in some of the early Apple products, or it's like the shape of a tree that becomes a column. So it's those are sort of biomorphic shapes.
Great, thank you, Oliver. Then we move on to the next one, which is Nina.
Yes. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Oliver, already for your beautiful story. It embodies a lot of the story we normally also tell when we start with projects and clients, to get them understand more why nature should be part of design or our environment. I chose this picture. It's strongly related also to the story of Oliver, but like our close relation to the nature, but also the idea that we spend 90% of our time indoors nowadays. So it's not even only like that we lost our connection with nature, we're not even looking for it anymore. And of course, for us, we try to bring back nature into the built environment, but we also try to still stimulate people to go outdoors and still look for nature. So I choose this image because I thought this first image, it was also for me more personal. Just like you took your home, Oliver. We recently went with our team. Also, of course, due to the COVID, you are restricted to your house, to the city environment, and we still wanted to see each other. So it's time to spend time outdoors. And we took a course, forest bathing, Shirin-yoku. It's a Japanese kind of ecotherapy, which they also subscribe to people who are like sick for a long time, to spend a minimum of 25 minutes in a real natural environment. And it shows really that it can help you for your physical health. Of course, like we have to bring back nature into the city, but we also have to still start stimulating people to look for nature, because slowly the nature is driven out of the city. But how can we bring nature or create cities or buildings which are totally surrounded by nature and bring it back, instead of like looking for it in this impossible way? And with that story in mind, we already try to really look together with architects and project developers to see like how can green really be a part of the city environment or the built environment. It has like on the indoor and the outdoor two totally different impacts, because on the outdoor it also really helps to make the city healthier. So like the temperature, the urban heat, it will help in the urban heat effect. It will help to attract biodiversity into the city. We have a lot of problems with water and the sewage system nowadays with the heavy rainfall, to get water slowly out of the city instead of like this really big water surfaces into the city environment. But also the indoor is getting more and more greener nowadays. And of course, because people spending 90% of their time indoors, they have a lot more eye irritation, headaches, people with asthma having more problems. Sick building syndrome is playing a role in it. So like new materials into buildings having all these tiny elements which are bad for your air or for your breathing. So due to placing plants, and not only one, but really creating ecosystems inside, like the back of Oliver Head, like placing plants together can really help you in like, yeah, feeling your connection back with nature again. And you in normal life, you also don't see like one single plant standing without anything around it. It's always, you have to combine plants to create this ecosystem. And we are part of that ecosystem. So don't think too small, but think big. How can you apply green as much as possible in your indoor or outdoor environment?
We'll speak about that a little bit later, I hope, Nina, about how to achieve that greener situation. But you raise an important issue, and that is to look at this matter from a really holistic point of view. So not only what can everybody do at their homes, but perhaps governments should, in tandem with developers and architects and urbanists, look at how entire cities can become greener. So greenery needs to be a holistic part of our built environment. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you very much, Nina. And then Antonin, you're looking from the outside in on this image. So what is your point of view when it comes to the benefits of living close and with nature?
Okay, so yeah, as Nina said, yeah, this is not only about the home inside scale somehow, but it's also about the whole relationship with the city. This is something at a way larger scale. But just before I get into that, I'd love to get back to the question itself. Like, what is the benefit we get from being close to nature? And so for me, I don't know if we say that, but I'm a bird watcher. I'm an architect and I watch birds also. And I feel in the question we are asking, somehow we are having a very classic human relationship to nature, is what trading with nature. Like the idea of benefit is that we're trading with it. We're given something and we expect to get something back somehow. And for me, I think we need to change that point of view somewhere very deeply if we want to change our relationship to nature. And that's quite important right now. As Robert, as you said, we are mostly urban right now. In France, for example, 61% of the people live in a city. And it's projected globally that 70% of the people will live in a city in the 2030s. So basically, the big question here is that trend still true today? Because of course, right now we are seeing the counter effect of that, as you said, Robert. But if this trend stays true, we need to reinvent our cities. We need to reinvent what it is to live together. And when I say live together, it also means not only between humans, but between humans and other species, other forms of livings, other understanding of nature. I don't know if you guys know a French tracker and a mammal tracker. He tracks like wolves, and he's also a philosopher. It's a guy called Baptiste Morisot. He's extremely interesting. He has really explored that idea of what it is to be alive, to be a living being today, and he's exploring new ways to being alive, basically. And one of the striking elements that he says is that I think, Oliver, you said that, something about patterns, about the ability to recognize patterns in nature. So there is an American study that has showed that kids that are 10 years old right now can recognize like a sheet full of logos, of brand logos in a blank, in a second, in a blink, they can really just recognize that. But if you present them with 10 leaves of the trees that are around them, they can't recognize any of them. So basically, as you guys both have said, we have completely lost touch with nature. We have completely forgotten that we are part of nature, let alone kind of its wilderness. We are really beyond that. So these images that I'm showing here are about reintroducing this. So basically, on the image on the right side, this is a shared architecture place. This is a co-living space. And it has this double balcony that is shared. So for us, this is that idea that it's the buildings are living facade, but not only these balconies are for greeneries, but also for people to live in there. So that's a reminder that we both, people, mankind, and greenery and nature basically are to live together. This is our normal state somehow. And we don't have to fight nature. We don't have to see that as a nature as an existential foe, but something that we are part of, as you said, Oliver. And just to end on this, I'm also half French and half Japanese. And so basically, both this idea of me being, I mean, not an idea, both the fact that I'm a bird watcher and half Japanese somehow gives me a very different perspective on what nature is than I would say an Occidental point of view. And so, for example, in Japan, greenery is nature, of course, but it's way wider. And that's a little bit the image on the left that I've showed here is the idea of the passing of the light, for example, even on a concrete wall. If you think of a Tadao Ando building with a light passing by on a concrete wall, this is in Japan, you're connected to nature when you see that happen. So I think we need to widen up our understanding of what nature is, our relationship. We need to redefine our relationship to nature. And we should understand something beyond just putting greens on our buildings to integrate a new relationship to nature. And maybe you can just close on that. So, if you think about our relationship to nature, basically, we have kind of two ways to understand it. We have rather kids' books that shows us animals and other types of beings, or very beautiful BBC documentaries. And so I believe as architects, it's kind of time to help have another adult relationship with these other types of beings, with nature.
So Antonin, you again stress the importance of living with nature, but you said something interesting, that we have this relationship with nature in such a way that we expect something in return from nature.
Exactly.
And we shouldn't be doing that.
No, we should really be understanding that somehow nature goes beyond a nice place to walk around, to stroll on, and just to take resources from, or to get benefits from. We are part of nature by definition. We are part of a bigger milieu, of a bigger ensemble, that we are sharing with other living beings. I think that's where the key is somewhere. More than a green thing, nature is a lot of other species.
So would that mean, for instance, that you advocate for letting greenery just go wild instead of cultivating it?
That's a good question. I think in the next slides I talk about artificial, original, and natural. And I think what you're meaning here about should we cut trees, basically take care of them, or take care of nature in general. Yeah, for me that comes a little bit from the same bias somehow, that we have to take care of it, that we are here on Earth to take care of nature is a strange idea somewhere.
Okay, well, let's wait what comes up with the next round of images and questions.
Yep.
We move on to the next question, the second of third. So we all have heard what the benefits are of living closer to nature. There are benefits for human beings. There are also benefits for the climate. There's benefits for the planet as a whole. But how can we do that? How can we live closer to nature with the modern home? Oliver, is this again your house?
No, I wish it was. No, this is a hotel room that we designed a couple of years back. And I think it's interesting that we've now moved into this area of sort of health and well-being in the home. Quite often it's trends in the home that tend to go out into the commercial world. But I think what's happened now is that it's sort of reversed, and actually it's the commercial world that's been leading in this area of health and well-being. And we've seen it in the workplace, in hospitality, in healthcare, and in education. And it's interesting that there is so much research that's been created in these other sort of spaces that we're now sort of going, well, now we're not actually going into those places. How can we realize some of those benefits? So, you know, there were some amazing statistics. You know, in the workplace, some studies have shown that workers with views onto nature can perform 10 to 25% better. Cognitive functioning improves, reductions in absenteeism. In education, you know, when we increase natural sunlight, there's an increase in speed of learning. In healthcare, in hospitals, research studies have shown that actually when we increase views onto nature, it can reduce recuperation rates of patients coming out of surgery. And yet there is a sort of something of a lack or a deficit of research studies about bringing nature into the home. There have been a few to show that actually where elements of nature have been brought into communal areas of domestic design, there's a reduction in crime, a reduction in domestic violence, an increase in property value by between 4 and 5%. And as I mentioned before, an increase in that sense of community. And again, you know, I think we're looking to some of these commercial areas and some of those studies to discuss how we can start to bring elements of nature back in. I've mentioned that there are these three ways: the direct elements of plants and trees and water, the indirect in natural materials and colors and textures, and also that human spatial response. And I think this room sort of managed to demonstrate how we should be taking this intrinsic approach. So in the room, we looked at all the sort of different features that we needed to apply to this hotel room and thought, well, how can we focus on health and well-being in every single element? Now, traditionally, design is used as a means to express power, wealth, identity, status, culture. And it's, you know, it's a sort of extrinsic message that goes out. And this really tries to reverse it by looking at how we can design for well-being. So all the features in this space are designed specifically to either welcome people in, so the use of bright, vivid yellows, these colors are there to remind us in something that we call ecological valence theory. So it suggests that colors that we find or have positive experiences of in nature can also elicit those positive responses in the built environment. The color of yellow being reminiscent of ripe summer crops and summer sunshine. The use of timber is really important. So we've used this, I don't know if you can just about see it there. This shows Sugi band timber. It's scorched and burnt and wire brushed. And just about here, it's kind of very textural. And there's actually studies that demonstrate from all over the world that when we bring timber into buildings, it can reduce heart rates. One study in a classroom showed that actually the use of real timber walls could reduce students' heart rates by 8,600 beats per day. A study of bedrooms showed that people who sleep in real timber beds have a reduced heart rate of 2,600 beats per night. So the use of timber and materials is really important. You can see in this room, we've enhanced that connection to the external environment, in this case, beautiful sort of woodland. Maximizing natural light by creating features that put people nearer to that light. So obviously the light nearer windows is much brighter and enhances that view. And we've got lots of different sensory qualities to the room. You'll see different kind of carpet surfaces. And then we've introduced water as well. Again, studies have shown over and over again that water is very good at masking background noise, very good at eliciting calm and relaxation. So bringing elements of water, be that a bathtub or a water feature, into a living space can be enormously beneficial. So lots of materials and things that we can be using. Some other materials that we've got here, this is sort of moss walls. This is preserved moss. This is kind of called organoid. This is natural materials pressed onto a backing. And it smells amazing, either of rose petals or of hay. Cork and timber surfaces. There are so many ways to mimic or evoke a feeling of nature coming onto the market at the moment. It's an enormously exciting time in design to find ways of enhancing that connection to nature.
Oliver, this is a masterclass in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. And you list a lot of do's, but what are the don'ts? I mean, I'm looking at all kinds of natural colors and natural materials. Does it mean that everything not natural should not be used?
Well, I think it's really about deciding how do you want people to feel, and how do we design to put people in that state of mind. In something like a hotel room, you want people to feel welcomed. You want them to feel immediately calmed and relaxed. You want them to get some of the benefit of this restorative space, to help them to sleep better at night, to help them wake up feeling more refreshed, to put them in a better physical and mental state for the day ahead, whether that's to go and explore a city or step into a business meeting. So we really need to think about the power that architecture wields over us and how we can design it to elicit a positive human spatial response, no matter what that is. But we have to kind of zone in on what is it that we want people to feel, and how do we deliver on that?
So, for instance, bright blue that you, I think, hardly find in nature. Would that be a no-go for this hotel room?
No, blues are actually very calming. And often for a lot of people, different shades of blue are reminiscent of cool, calm pools of water. So they have this sort of association with calmness. Yellows are more energizing and invigorating. We see this as a very welcoming color. So it's great for social spaces. And then shots of sort of yellows and oranges are more stimulating and energizing. And we're not necessarily suggesting that you should be painting entire rooms with this, because that would be overwhelming. We are suggesting that we use colors in ways that we find them in nature, in proportions, but also in the physical plane, so that it makes sense to people when they use that. So there are different sort of rules about how we can bring nature in, but it really is about observation of the benefits we experience in real forms of nature and find ways of translating that into our built environment.
Finding the balance. It's all about that. Nina.
Yes.
How can we bring nature into the modern home?
Yes, so I took this image. It's a project from Mia Design Studio. It's the Sky House. And if you look at these images, you think like, wow, this is like truly an amazing house. But you don't realize that this is standing in the middle of the city Saigon. And it's like surrounded by all these skyscrapers with no green at all. And I think it's...
Or is this a rendering?
No, this is built. And I think it's amazing what they did, because of course also people are often looking like, I mean, not everyone has the chance to, especially in dense cities, to have this giant floor plan or like a giant house to live in. So you also need the space you have to place your bed, to move, to have your kids running around, or to use it. And like place plants is of course wonderful, but it also takes space, especially when you want to have bigger plants. And what I think was incredible what they did in this house is that they actually didn't integrate any of the green indoor, but they placed everything kind of on the outside shell of the house. And wherever you are in the house, you always see green. If you look out of the window, it really truly looks like you are living in a park. And you stop like thinking you're living in this crowded, amazing city. And of course, like in every culture or every country, it's different how you deal with green, because in this type of countries like Vietnam, they have like a whole different climate. So like plants are growing in a different way. But it's truly amazing how this is like part of the building, and you really can escape the city as soon as you enter your own home. And I think that is like something you should be able to as soon as you like finished your day. And that's of course now more difficult because people are even working from home. But back in the days, the house is really a place where you should rest, become like relax, and get out of the big rush of the city, your work and everything. And it really should be like, whew, I'm at home. And it's so cool if we start designing and not like let people only add green into their house, but that is already part of the design, so that the space is not really, it's already asking for it. So there's a planter integrated at the balcony, there's maybe a planter integrated in the house, and you have to have green, you have to live together with the nature. And as I said already before, it should be part of the building, and we should design it, and it should be accessible for everyone. And of course it's a great start, and I love the whole idea of also live with all the biophilic elements. But I think it would be great if you design a building that for the people living across the street in another building, they look also at something which is green and not like a new building. So it all should relate to each other, and we all should make it possible to create the city as an entire home. So it should not feel like when you enter your own place it's only green, but that everyone creates this place where you feel home, and even you're outside, inside, or wherever you go, it has this nature around it. And what Antonin also said, like we should not like think like I have to add it. It should be already there, because we are also there and we are part of it. So actually, I think every house should already have in their design, like new house which will be designed, or residential areas, it should already have thought about how people can make it part of it, instead of that they have to do it ourselves. And if we grow up or start learning to respect the nature again, it will be in the future probably also more logical that people will want to have the green. And that you've seen it already the past years. Green is really become a vibe. Everyone has like now all these loose plants, and I think that's amazing. And it's a really stepping stone to start even developing the architecture further than we are doing already.
So you're putting the responsibility in the first place with the real estate developers and the architects.
I think they can have the biggest impact on the city scale. And of course, we as like human being part of living in the city, we should definitely participate and create on a smaller scale, can contribute ourselves. But if we really want to make this big impact, I think the buildings should be designed in a way that green is a part of it. And of course, green is still, unfortunately, a part which is, when it's like after the design phase, it's still cut out. A big part of it is cut out due to costs. And we should look into a way that it's more affordable for everyone.
So nature is not an option for you. It's a must. It should be integrated.
I mean, we rely on it. I mean, if we cut out nature, we're not even existing. So, yeah.
I think I have the feeling that this is very close to what Antonin will be talking about. Antonin?
Yes. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Yes.
How can we intertwine nature with the modern home?
Yes. So, for me, somehow, there needs to be a change of perspective at the personal scale. Somehow, we need to start looking at nature not only as just something that we use or something that we enjoy or something that we somehow take care of, but something that we are part of somehow. And so that happens from a personal point of view, I think, to start with. And so that's on the right side. You can see that image. This is the cover of a PDF that I made during the confinement. This is called Window Birds. And so basically what I've done is I've put together in a kind of a book all the 55 species that are easy to see and to from your window. Because basically when I was in confinement, a lot of my friends knew I watch birds. And so they called me and were like, okay, what is that bird that I can see from here? And I always receive like this micro photo with pixelized micro birds on it, you know? And so I just made that PDF and sent that to my friends. But the idea here is to open up your senses within the city on other types of life that exist there, just to make you see, as personally to see that we are not the only species inhabiting our environment, the city first of all. And so on the left side, this is a project that we've done with the studio. This is something called bird wall. And so basically this is a metallic structure that you put rather on blind walls, but also it could exist as a facade system with windows. And so you have planters there and an irrigating system, and also insect hotels and bird houses, little bird houses. And what we do here is we do a survey beforehand on which plants should go there in order to attract or to sustain certain species of insect, hence certain species of birds. So basically that's a whole idea that we are not just one species in the world and then all the other ones are called nature. We put them in a big box that we call nature. Just we are sharing an environment with a lot of different types of lives. And that's what this relationship kind of somehow could switch from. And we could think of our, basically of our buildings to be planted like trees to activate the biodiversity and to make the city an environment that is not only made for us, but also made for the diversity of living species that exist with us and that we share the environment with. And so I think one of the big questions to solve somehow is that we need to change our point of view on this cultural heritage that we have, that we see nature. Basically, we do two mistakes, I think. First of all, we oppose natural with artificial. So we think that nature is the opposite of artificial. And the other thing is we misdefine natural with original. So basically there is this triangle between natural, artificial, and original that is a Western background that we need to get rid of, that we need to really break out in order to understand a way wider understanding of our position with nature. And I hope that's what the window birds can start doing at a kind of a personal perspective, from a personal perspective.
Well, it's interesting that you speak about another form of nature, animals. We haven't discussed that so far. Do you think that bringing animals into the home would also be beneficial to somebody's health and well-being?
Do we mean like pets or big tigers, or what do we mean?
It could be pets. I wouldn't recommend big tigers.
I'm not sure about this. I remember when I was young, I used to go in Paris into the places where you have the birds in cages, you know, and open these cages to let the bird go away. So I'm not sure about putting at least that type of animals there. Again, I'm more into thinking about the design of our cities and our environments from a different point of view that we're used to, a point of view that sees the nature as something we can just benefit from or enjoy, but something that we see as an environment full of living beings. And I think we should kind of reshape that, maybe the idea of nature, just to confront that idea of nature and to push it towards living beings somehow, an ensemble of living beings.
Robert, can I just jump in there? Because
Sure.
There is research that actually demonstrates that stroking pets like cats and dogs actually has an ability to reduce heart rates and blood pressure levels to alleviate stress. So it has been proved that having pets is good for you. And also I think it's good for one's immune system. Added to that, I think once you have pets and realize that they are sentient beings, it does increase one's empathy for a wider sense of biodiversity. And if you can look after one pet, then maybe you can look after something that exists beyond the confines of the walls of your home. And so, you know, it might encourage you to look after birds in your garden, or hedgehogs or foxes or other bugs and animals, and realize, you know, we're part of this wider web of biodiversity. So maybe it is, having a pet is a stepping stone to appreciating this wider biodiversity that is so essential.
Thanks, Oliver. I was going to ask you, but thank you for jumping in anyway. So now we've learned why it's important to be closer to nature than we are currently. We have looked at some ways how to intertwine nature with our homes. Then the next question would be, what major change needs to happen to enable homes to become greener? Because if you look at it, if it's so positive for us, if it's so beneficial for us and for the planet, why aren't we doing it? So how do we get there? What's preventing us from living closer to nature? Oliver.
Okay. Well, I think what is clear from everything that everyone has said is that nature is not just a nice to have. It is an essential part of human health and well-being, and we need it for our basic human survival. And both Antonin and Nina have stressed that as well. And what we have seen is that there is a very strong business case to demonstrate that, you know, if we bring nature into our lives, it can enhance building activation. So it can enhance the quality of that building and the experiences in it, but also reduce negative costs, things like absenteeism, turnover, and illness. So there are lots of reasons why we should be bringing nature in. I think what we need to do is think about it in a more holistic way, that just bringing nature into the home won't necessarily alleviate the many problems that we face in our cities. So this image that we see here is based on the diet triangle. And this is basically a nature triangle. And what it suggests is that we need to find ways of bringing nature into our cities in a much more holistic way. It suggests that, yes, at the top of the triangle, we may have the occasional deep exposure to nature But this might be a sort of high energy or high carbon intensive approach to kind of immersing oneself in nature, you know, when we go on holiday. But added to that, and that might be, you know, once a year sort of activity. But as we go down, what we start to see is that we do need to find ways of bringing in that nature connection in a kind of monthly, weekly, but also daily approach. And that has to happen not just in our homes, across a range of spaces in our cities. So it needs to happen in our home, in our street, in our neighborhood, but also as it sort of spreads out with a kind of an even spread of blue and green spaces. And some interesting questions arise when we start to think about our nature contact in the city, when we think of it in this sort of nature triangle, is that, you know, firstly, what is our nature diet on a daily basis? How much nature do we get exposure to? And how do we make sure that we've got that as a means to support our mental well-being? And equally, you know, what is an adequate portion of nature to keep our stress levels low, to keep us feeling mentally and physically fit? You know, is it simply that we need to hear birds, or that we need to see water, or that we need to kind of see gentle movements, what we call non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, something that we see in nature all the time, but we tend to kind of cut out in our built environment. So that's that very sort of gentle movement we see of ripples in a pool of water or leaves moving on a tree, non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, something that we find all the time in nature, but much less so in the built environment. So really, you know, how do we interweave nature into our daily experiences, but also weekly, monthly, and yearly across a whole range of different spaces in our city? And I think that is the issue, is that sort of creates a kind of need for us to think about it as an individual homeowner, but also as local authorities or as kind of national sort of visions of how we bring nature in. And it's something that a city like Singapore has managed to do very well.
What do you think a company like IKEA could do to bring us closer to nature?
Well, I know that they are doing all sorts of things. They've got lots and lots of products out there that make it easier for us to bring nature in. So of course, you know, it is in part about, you know, having plants and pots, but it may also be about how it can foster our well-being. So I know that they have internal growing systems, so that you can actually grow your own plants and vegetables at home. It may be about having green wall systems, but then it may be also looking, you know, into the sort of wider network of how we can start to influence the urban realm. We're seeing the influx of green wall systems coming onto the market, and this is something that could be used more readily on the outside of houses or buildings and start to sort of infiltrate into that public realm. It may be equally that organizations like IKEA need to think beyond the confines of the domestic environment and work out how they can bring some of the goodness they're bringing in the home into that public realm a little bit more. And a really interesting example of that is the Pocket Park movement that was started in San Francisco and has now started to sort of to spread all over the world, of finding, you know, even tiny little forgotten spaces in cities and finding ways of bringing greenery and nature and plants into the city, particularly where people can sit and enjoy it.
So there's a responsibility not only with governmental institutions, but also with brands to act and to make cities and our lives greener.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, Oliver. Nina.
So yes, here I took it's a project, it's more a research project. It's from Effect, and it's about the urban project. It's looking into new ways of living and combining urban areas where livability, sustainability, and affordability all take a role in it. And it's really looking into new ways of architecture and creating the cities, but it's also about a new way of thinking where I think in the past more we're thinking from our ego perspective. We now have to think in this more like eco perspective, and I think that's slowly happening. And that's also what you see is like, for me, it's also a part about education and telling the story of the importance, and not only like in like educating, you have to do it like that, but it's more in that inspiring way, showing what is possible. And I know that like for now, maybe green buildings are not affordable, but when I started in 2013 with my company, there was not even, nobody even spoke about a green roof. That was not even like a possibility. And nowadays you see in regulations, you see it in Paris, but also in the Netherlands, there are subsidies for green roofs. New buildings have to be BREEAM well certificate. They have to be green. I think it's a lot about trying and being not scared to maybe also fail. If you look at the project of Bosco Verticale in Milan, I mean, it was like a front runner of what was possible, and it had a lot of critique at the beginning, but now it shows like how
May I interrupt you for a second, because you are speaking about a project in Milan, Bosco Verticale, that is perhaps not known to everybody.
Oh,
That's
sure.
that's some sort of a skyscraper with balconies protruding quite some meters out of the building, and the balconies are filled with greenery, with plants and trees even. That's part of a project done by the architect Stefano Boeri, and he is building a similar building now in Eindhoven and in Utrecht. So this kind of building is spreading out all over the world.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for explaining it to me. I think what's happening now, and there's like, we are working on so many buildings where green is integrated, and it now has to be built. And you will slowly see, like as in Amsterdam, you were already seeing it happening, that buildings starting to green up. And when I was studying, there was like not a master or like a course about how to integrate green in a building, or at least to learn anything about green. And I studied architecture. So how can we expect from people who are not even related to creating the city and environment to understand how to integrate it? Because I see the responsibility as an architect to green up or create the city where we live in. And by telling this story and also inspiring people and letting them understand why it's so important and what this connection is, and showing only maybe it's a tiny project like greening up like a tram stop where you're passing by and it's totally green, and it's explained why this is so important and that it attracts biodiversity, and someone thinks like, wow, I can do this at home, or I can do this at my place. And I already saw like a question passing by, like, it's not for everyone affordable. No, maybe not today, like in this living in this amazing green architectural shaped residential building. But if it's already possible now, it will be definitely affordable for everyone within hopefully 5 years. So yeah.
Well, here's hoping that. Meanwhile, we have to live with these beautiful renderings and visions of the future, and take some learnings from cities like Singapore, as Oliver was talking about, and some projects by architects like Stefano Boeri, the Italian architect. Thank you, Nina. Antonin, how can we make our homes greener? How can we make our future greener?
Okay, yeah. I'll show 3 projects here. And just to get back 1 second to you, Nina. The first project that I showed with the balconies, right now we are building something very similar with the studio, and it's getting quite affordable. We are using modular construction systems to do this, and that helps a lot try to reduce the cost of that type of industrial scale that we're trying to reach at the scale of the city. So I personally have great hopes that quite soon we're going to be able to industrialize that kind of systems that allow greenery to grow on buildings from the roots of the design, basically.
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is also the maintenance, where a lot of parties or like the owners of the buildings are scared of. But I will be sure, like, if when it's shown that it will work and it's possible.
Yeah, right now we are building a co-living space that is 200 bedrooms. So a kind of a big building made of that, and with the whole maintenance system and all that is integrated. So I hope that could make that can help that somehow. Okay, so just three projects that I think are quite interesting. So the first one on the left is a Meghalaya bridge. It's in the Meghalaya in India. It's a bridge made of roots. It's a living bridge. So me, I've worked in India for 1.5 years with Balkrishna Doshi, an architect, and I've been into these places. And so basically what that is this is an architecture where both the social environment and the natural environment are woven together, literally, to make architecture, to build something. So here, the idea is the building is made of the roots of a fig tree. And the idea is that an elder one will give a younger one a route with a direction to cross. And basically the idea is you nurture that route in order to build that bridge at the end of the day. And so for me, that's quite an interesting path here, as I said, to break that triangle of natural, artificial, original, where something is completely woven, is completely blended together. And basically the idea of these bridges also, just to give you a bit of context, it's in the Meghalaya, it's in the counter forts of the Himalaya. And that's a very, very wet place. That's one of the wettest places in the world. And basically, if you would build a bridge with industrialized wood or with steel, it would rot. So that's a very, very ingenious solution for that, both technically, but also at a social level and also a building level. That is the idea of building with living elements, not using the greenery as something that we put on the facade, but basically to work with it, like to be really from the root, literally with it. And so the second project, the project that is in the middle, is something by Baubotanik from Ferdinand Ludwig in Stuttgart. This is a research project. So that guy, Ferdinand Ludwig, he had seen that, that bridge here. And basically what he has done is he has tried to industrialize that philosophy of building. And so he has mixed together metallic structure. Maybe you can see a bit of the grid on the image. This is a metallic structure. And with it, you have a tree, a sage tree, I think you call it in English. And the idea is that it grows, it literally grows. So basically the pillar, the metallic pillar, goes with a joint with the tree, and they blend together. And when the tree grows, it brings the whole structure with it. So this little element here that you see is a building that literally grows. It grows up for real. So I find that very, very interesting also from a Western point of view to try to industrialize that idea of a growing building, of a living building. And then on the last image on the right, this is very much the kind of the spiritual grandchildren of the Stefano Boeri Bosco Verticale. This is one in Brisbane from Takeda, but this is just that idea is to show you that a lot of projects are coming up exactly like that, like these towers that are trees, basically, that are going to make a kind of a new environment, that a city is a kind of a new type of a forest, but that is not only just a wild forest, but a forest that is mixing a structure, a man-made structure, and a natural structure. So somehow blending both is, I think, a direction that is very, very interesting for the kind of the midterm, long-term future here. And basically for me to answer very literally that question of what should we do in order to help that happen, we should fund a lot these projects. Basically, we should fund the research a lot on that type of project in order to really come up with a complete other understanding of what we think of architecture right now.
This is, let's say, introducing the wilderness outside. That's very clear. And it's also part of the thinking of Nina, especially. Both of you speak a lot about making our urban environments and the buildings that we live in a lot greener by integrating them with nature. And looking at your right-hand picture, Antonin, is another example of greening the building. But this is not possible for people like students or even myself living at home in an apartment in Amsterdam. I cannot influence this. It's clear that governments, real estate developers, architects, urban planners, they should go into this direction. But let's go back to people living at home. What can they do? I mean, how can they release the wilderness inside of their homes? And I'll stop sharing my screen and open up to some kind of group conversation for a bit. So yeah, I think the question is clear. Oliver, what do you think? I mean, you also advocate for greener spaces, and especially if I may summarize your presentation, for all kinds of materials and use of color that are much closer to nature, that kind of mimic nature. But what I didn't see in your images, in your examples, is the release of wilderness inside homes. Should we go there? Should we release that wilderness, or should we control nature? Should we put plants in pots and put them in a corner?
Well, I mean, I think releasing nature does sound a little bit dangerous, going back to some of Antonin's questions about releasing tigers and wild animals into your home. So I think there are limitations, and you've got to be realistic that, you know, whilst, you know, a background of greenery does look lovely and lush, it does take quite a lot of maintenance and time. So you've got to be prepared to interact with it. But that can be a very good thing. You know, studies have shown that actually when we interact with soil, it can release sort of positive hormones within us that are like natural antidepressants. So it can be very beneficial. The tricky thing is that, you know, we live a lot within the existing built environment that hasn't necessarily been designed to integrate with nature. So I think by 2050, 80% of the built environment that we already have we'll still be living with. So we're only going to build in the UK another 20% of buildings. So the opportunity to integrate nature into new architecture is relatively limited. So we are faced with a challenge of how do we bring nature in? And like I said, what is the right amount? How much do we actually need? We don't necessarily need to be creating wild jungles inside our home. If being able to care and nurture for a few plants and a few pets is enough to reduce the stresses and strains of living in a post-COVID world where we're working from home and maybe not having the sort of diversity of experiences with spaces or people that we used to have in our cities. So it really is probably a personal decision about how much time you have to invest, and really, you know, what does your nature diet require in order to facilitate a greater level of well-being?
Nina, do you agree?
Yes, I definitely agree, and I think it's indeed also at the end a personal choice, like in what way you can add green and who is taking in your indoor environment or your home environment the responsibility for the plants. I think it definitely adds something into your living room, and I would always suggest to maybe try to create this mini ecosystem, like not only one plant, but maybe combine or add more, or like add 2 or 3 in one planter, because they also benefit from each other. And it, I mean, it's like creating this tiny park or forest into your house. And I think nowadays there are so many, like every shop, even like in a clothing shop, where the Zara is selling planters and pots for plants, and you can see it everywhere. And you can get like servettes and like plates in shapes of leaves, and it's such a trend. So I think you can create this indoor wildness like in very different ways. So it doesn't not mean you need only plants. You can also decide to add this wallpaper against your wall, which is like a forest, if you would love to. I think it's definitely for everyone's benefit to add something which has a relation to nature or a natural element into your house, because it's, and Oliver explained that super well, like it's proven that it benefits your health. And I think like even adding elements to your balcony border or whatever is possible, all small tiny things help. And also for the biodiversity, if everyone puts one place on their balcony or tiny outdoor element area or whatever they have, we can already make together a tremendous big impact. Because if every inhabitant of the city places one plant outside, can you imagine like how many plants there are in Paris or in Amsterdam? Or, I mean, that's already a big impact you can have all together. So I would definitely say like add like green or a biophilic element into your environment.
There's another question. That if the interior of a home becomes more symbolic of the wider natural environment, what should these symbols remind us of? And what thoughts should it trigger in our everyday life?
Well, if I can jump in here, I think the important thing is that we all recognize that being in nature makes us feel good. If you think about it, when we go on holiday, we take a break from our work. We tend to go to the beach, the mountains and the forests. And when we're in those spaces, we become very different people after a very short period of time. You know, it reduces that stress. You feel all that anxiety just wash off us. We have very different conversations with people around us. We sleep differently. Our circadian rhythms change. So it's not necessarily about replicating natural wild environments in the Amazon or maybe in, you know, northern Norway or somewhere else. It is about eliciting that positive emotional response from the experiences that remind us. So it is a very personal thing. I think we all recognize that nature makes us feel good. We just need to key into kind of what it is that would remind us of those positive experiences to kind of bring out that sort of similar emotional response to the spaces that are so important to our lives, our homes.
Thank you. Antonin, do
Yeah,
you
for
agree?
me, I might say something very flat here, but our relationship inside, I feel, with nature is a lot about light, about natural light. This is something that connects us with the plant somehow. I'm saying I feel very flat things, but I'm just saying, yeah, for me, we don't have to really replicate the kind of the Amazonian forest, as you say, Oliver, within our homes or a cave. I don't think that's kind of a literal understanding of that, but having a feeling of the passing of time, of the lights, of the sunlight inside, I think is at least a Japanese understanding of what nature is within somehow.
Thank you. I have the feeling we have reached the end of this conversation. I can tell you some takeaways from listening to you. I learned that nature, we should be closer to nature because it's not only beneficial for our health and well-being, but also for the climate. It's better for the planet. It makes us better, more relaxed people, more able to focus on our daily jobs, the things that we need to do. It makes us also less stressed, just more fun to be with. And nature is not only plants, it's also light. So enjoy light, let light enter your homes and your work spaces. Nature is also animals. So watch for those birds and take care of a cat or a dog. It will make you feel better. There's the bird watcher amongst us. So plants, animals, light, sunlight, of course, lots of vitamins in there, all good for you. So that's why we should be closer to nature. And how you can do that? Well, nature should somehow become more integrated in the architecture, in our built environment. And that's, of course, first and foremost, a responsibility of governmental institutions, of architects, of urban planners, of real estate developers. I hope some of them are watching. I'm sure that it will be a positive asset of any home in the future if it will be more closer to nature. Nina, you showed us a beautiful image of an existing project in that regard, where a tree was actually outside and inside, both inside and outside. I found that very inspirational. So it is actually not that far-fetched being closer to nature from an architectural perspective. What else did I take away? What changes do need to happen? Well, I think that governments, but also brands, should inform people of the possibilities and the benefits of being closer to nature and offer opportunities to reach that in terms of offering products and creating projects that, well, practice what these brands and governments are preaching. Anything I forgot, Oliver?
No, I mean, I think the fundamental point is that our health and well-being is intrinsically linked to the health and well-being of the planet around us. And we need to recognize that. That's kind of so important that we're not distinct from it. We're very much part of it. We've got to look after it and it will look after us.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of this conversation, and this is something I would like to share with you. This is part of a conversation we were having with IKEA. I thought there would be something else coming. Sorry for that. So the conversation took place together with IKEA as part of their virtual greenhouse project. That's a website that you can visit, the virtual greenhouse by IKEA. Just look it up. You will find there more videos. You will find masterclasses from all kinds of people showing you how you can green your life, basically, in all kinds of ways. Furthermore, I need to mention that this conversation was part of Dutch Design Week. Dutch Design Week is an initiative that normally takes place in real life, but as so many other initiatives, has been cancelled and is taking place in a virtual way. There will be more coming from Dutch Design Week, all kinds of happenings taking place on your screen. One of them I would like to mention will be happening on Saturday. That will be a discussion about something completely different, and yet maybe not so different. It's about parametric architecture, offering all kinds of interactive experiences through architecture and design. I will be hosting another panel like this. So maybe look it up, might be interesting for you. And going onward next week is a whole range of sessions by frame, together with the Architect Trade Fair, that also has been cancelled, and the IBA, the German Association of Office Furniture Manufacturers. And that will be all about the future of the workplace. And yes, we will be discussing nature and how nature and how being closer to biomorphic and biophilic forms and shapes will make for a better workplace. Panelists, Nina, Antonin, Oliver, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your experiences. IKEA, thank you very much for teaming up with this. Dutch Design Week, thank you for being able to use your platform, and good luck with the rest of the week. Audience, thank you for watching this. And the last thing I'm going to say to you is that there will be a recording of this session available early next week on frameweb.com. And probably you will also find a recording on IKEA's virtual greenhouse platform anytime soon. Thanks for watching. Thank you for being with us, panel. I wish you a really nice rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.